Today we have a letter written by Mrinmay Booth. I met Mrinmay on an online community called Nerd Fight Area. Here we geek out about art, books, and everything that most people don't geek out about or are excited by. Mrinmay likes to describe herself as a writer, but she says she's really an architect. She will probably find one day to have books for walls. She is super into Neil Gaiman and she loves modern art. And if you're into any of those things, she'll love to geek out about it with you. Which is why it felt special when I requested her to write this letter to Joan of Arc, because Joan of Arc was really somebody who went after what she wanted to do without paying any heed to what anybody else was saying or what was the weather of the day. She didn't care. She went for what she wanted to do. So here's a letter by Mrinmay Booth to Joan of Arc. Cher Jean, I have thought about you and your deeds almost every day when I was a teenager. I remember coming across the story of the siege of Orleans and a painting of you astride your horse in my history textbook in class 9. I remember thinking how saintly you looked and steadfast. Something about this year has reminded me of you all over again. And so I am writing you this letter in admiration. I read about your valor, first in history class, how you led a French army and garnered victory. You are your people. I was struck by how young you were, but how level-headed. The people believed that you were their savior, but in so many ways, the life you led saved me and inspired me. You fought with all your might for your people, and yet you were accused of heresy. You were abandoned and declared a witch. You were burned at the stake for your country. Things have been tense here, Sean. Every day I question my own strength, and I question if I can fight for what is right. And I'm reminded of you, stoic astride your horse. You were so young, and yet to have the courage to do what you did, it stirs me. Did you know, maybe, that they might label you a witch? That they might accuse of sorcery? I believe you would have done the same even if you did. When I was in school, I remember looking up to you for showing the strength you did when you were so young. And now I know that to do what must be done, to fight for what you believe is right, takes a lot of courage. And you inspire me to do that every day. Yours, an admirer, Mrinmay Booth. This letter really reminds me that we need to have the courage to go after what we think is right. Thank you, Mrinmay, for reminding all of us that. See you all tomorrow.
I can't contain my excitement to share this letter with you all, which is written by Nandhini, who I met very recently, but we hit it off instantly and I couldn't be more grateful. Nandhini, who's 20, is a student of literature and shares her love for life and laughter through her art. She can be found chasing sunsets with a flower in her hair in the nooks and corners of Delhi. Every now and then, leaving notes for people she loves. Hey Nandu, I hope I find mine soon. Thank you so much for writing this letter, Nandu. She's writing this letter to Noor Inayat Khan. And here it is. Dear Noor, are you doing well? I bet you are. I'm not someone you know. I'm not someone you could have known either. We've belonged to different worlds, but somehow lately, I find our worlds walking towards each other. I guess somehow I find myself anchoring my belief in what I've heard of you, because every time I try to reach you, you vanish in hazy secondary memories or articles of glory, or thin air, murmurs of how you've lived so many lives. As a musician, as a writer, as a radio operator, as a prisoner, and above them all, as someone who built herself over and over again against all the hardships she was presented with. I was making a list of the first women ever, and I came across your life. Do you know they have schools named after you? Your grave is facilitated with medals. I mean, not like you'd care. We're still far away from the freedom we were fighting for. But tell me you smile more often when you see another woman become the first ever to do that, even when they're told they cannot, even when they're asserted that it is not possible. I bet you're rooting for them in your books and songs. Dearest Noor, I'm sorry that you had to leave so early, but you still managed to light up so many lives just by your name. I want to be known as a woman who didn't give in. I want to be known as the one who worked for something that her heart believed in. A woman so soft yet so strong that her belief wouldn't dwindle even in her last breath. I want to be known as the one who, after fighting her part, smiled back. Even in the harshest of places, when my mind will think of giving up, with all my heart I will think of you, and maybe this belief will become the light that will guide me home. I hope at your humble abode you're warm and filled with love, yet sending you more of it. Nandhini.
Today we have a letter written by my dear friend Anshika Agarwal. Anshika describes herself as a feminist and a businesswoman, but I know her for being ambitious and not being shy of showing it. And that is something I've always admired about her, and that is something that has always inspired me. Because so often, especially in India, we are told, women are told, girls are told that we should have only one ambition, which is to make a home and get married and have kids and take care of those kids. But she has always inspired me to be more, to tap into that side of me that is ambitious. And so I'm very happy that she decided to write a letter to another inspirational figure, Cleopatra. Inspirational and controversial. So, without further ado, a letter written by Anshika Agarwal to Cleopatra. Dear Cleopatra, another day has gone by and I continue to evaluate my role as a woman in the big wide scheme of things in this world. It has now become involuntary for me to tread upon this path. Even when I have everything, I feel like I am nothing. Perhaps no other iconoclast can exemplify this predicament better than you, Cleopatra. Do you know your name is associated with excruciating, ignoble historical judgment? Somewhere I do too, and somewhere we all are wrong. Has womanhood and power ever aligned in the history of mankind? Rarely it has. Your story was the first. As I continue to navigate through power struggle in my personal and professional life, You have become my heroine. You are the symbol of uninhibited female sexuality. You are the impetuous ruler. You display emotion. You are a fighter. If male toxicity and privilege can dominate our lives in the 21st century, I can only imagine how you would have navigated your relationships in an even worse case. You have taught me if a woman is at the top, she doesn't need to appropriate a man. She can be herself. She need not lose her emotions, her femininity. And that is my profound learning from you, a woman so grossly misinterpreted by the history. Inspired by you to have the will to tame a lion, Anshika Agarwal. Right. And does that not, like, that can't all of you relate to this? I can. I mean, being a woman just sometimes means that you can be one thing. But Cleopatra didn't pay heed to these gender norms. She was everything. And I love it how Anshika puts it. Anshika, being an expert on international policies and studying MBA right now, she knows how difficult it is to navigate in the conventional male society, but she keeps her head strong. And I tell you, people, keep your head strong. We are all here for each other. See you tomorrow. Today's reading is going to be a long one, but I promise you, every word spoken today is going to be significant because today's author is Ahalya Mathan. Ahalya is somebody who thrives on storytelling. She was trained in perfumery and fragrance in France. She's also the founder of Registry of Saris, and she's also a very compassionate soul. She leads all her endeavors with passion and compassion, and that is visible when you meet her. Parts of me aspire to be like her one day, and today I am really excited to read her letter to us about Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, who as a woman signifies so much. She was Indian freedom activist, social reformer, feminist icon, and craft savior. So here's the letter Ahalya wrote to us about Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay. Amongst the textile and craft community in India and those familiar with the world of modern Indian textiles, Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay is a name that is well recognized and revered. However, few know that Kamla Devi ji was a woman ahead of her times. We are experiencing a world on which the axis has quite literally shifted. And as the world unites over the disruption that the COVID virus has caused, we are so grateful to be able to look back at the lessons that women of substance like Kamla ji have provided us with. Known in her student days as the uncrowned Queen of India, Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay was a rare combination of beauty, intelligence, courage, and commitment. In her person, since her early childhood, she assimilated the values imparted by her mother, grandmother, and the English suffragette Margaret Cousin. In short, a generation of women who instilled in her values, which guided her life and work for over 7 decades. Kamla Devi represented a generation of Indian women who were freedom fighters in and out of jail, but also who were responsible for freeing Indian women from the shackles of narrow social and economic boundaries. However, it is her legacy of bravery and feminism at a time when it was barely a recognized term that I am deeply grateful for. Her life was enveloped by tragedy. She was a victim of the worst kind of traditional practices. Being widowed in her early years, the death of her father, the ill treatment of her mother, followed by the death of her sister. But none of these events stopped her from pursuing the larger cause, those of a freedom fighter, reformer, and even an entrepreneur. By championing the Indian craft and textile sector, she alleviated focus towards the cause of the unseen and unheard women worker. For the first time in Indian history, thanks to her efforts, she drew the unorganized sector into the purview of the government and governance, thus creating a system that formally recognized the importance and sustenance of the humble weaver or craftsperson. From the 1950s, Kamla Devi turned increasingly to the revival and promotion of India's rich, varied, and endangered craft traditions. She established the All India Handicrafts Board and headed it for 20 years. She formed cooperatives to market the products of craftsmen and to provide them credit, and instituted awards to motivate them. This was one of the earliest examples of self-help groups. She urged state governments to cut out middlemen and deal directly with craftsmen, source their products, and sell them through their own emporia. The Indian crafts are still alive and, moreover, have a visible national and international presence is owed more to Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay than to any other individual. In this long journey, Kamla Devi eschewed power, position, explicit political leadership. No public office could attract her, and instead, it was the position of alleviating the suffering of the people which was her calling. It is her that I'm personally deeply grateful for the path she paved for women in India who came after her. I am not from the textile world, and I can vouch that this is not a world where doors open easily or where systems and people are open to change and new ways of doing things. For me, her story gives me courage to tread the path of the unknown, secure and thankful in the knowledge that a pioneer walked before me and created lasting practices today that still champion those that uphold India's most enduring treasures, textiles and crafts. This letter that Ahalya wrote is to us to tell us that we must treasure and build upon what is ours, and we must fight and uplift those who we can. For this lesson, Ali, I'm grateful to you. Thank you so much.
I'm very excited to read today's letter because it's been written by a very dear friend, Deepak Ramola. Deepak is the founder and artistic director of Project Fuel. Not only is he a 2-time TED Talk speaker and UN Action Plan executor, he's a celebrated lyricist in Hindi cinema. He's also a published author of a collection of Hindi poetry. Let me tell you, I'm the biggest fan. Deepak's unique methodology of passing life lessons is recognized as an innovation in education and serves people all around the world. Thank you so much for writing this letter, Deepu. He's writing it to Noor Jahan. Here it is. Dear Noor Jahan, you were a legend much before they even started using the word popularly. Between the haunting melodies and soothing texture of your voice, many people in the world spent their nights hopeful of a better tomorrow because you convinced them there was. From the folk tunes of Sanu Nehar Wale Pul Te Bulake to the lyrical swing of Mujhse Pehli Si Mohabbat. You choreographed a way of being. Your expressions added a new layer of love and sincerity to music. I often find myself playing your songs in YouTube and Spotify now. Playlists after playlists. And I wonder if they could name you a Doctor of Hearts. For Malika Tarannum may never be sufficient to celebrate your legacy. Your music is my strength. Forever your fan, Deepak.
Today, we have the extreme privilege of having a letter written by Ursula de Castro. You'll all know who she is. She is the creative director and co founder of Fashion Revolution. Fashion Revolution is the biggest activism movement of fashion in this century. She is also a fashion mom to very privileged emerging designers, privileged only because they get to be mentored by her. And hey, I'm one of them. So here I am reading today a letter by Ursula de Castro written to Hypatia. Letter to Hypatia. My paternal side of the family had been living in Egypt for generations, and the first time I read your story, Hypatia, I was 10 and spending my summer holiday at my grandfather's house in Alexandria, where you were born and lived. My father and his cousins had grown up in that house, as had my elder brothers, when they were tiny, before my family returned semi-permanently to Italy in the mid-60s, just before I was born. It was a long hot summer, and to beat the boredom, I was given free rein of the family attic. One trunk after another of forgotten treasures, amongst them a book and your story inside it. It wasn't what you did that I identified with. Maths and geometry were precisely the subjects I wanted to forget about while not at school. But how and why you did it, that inspired me. And the thought that you used your brain and knowledge like magic to explore the seemingly impossible and to inspire others to do the same. But what really excited me was that you were not a queen, not a ruler, and not a saint, but a woman who was loud enough to be heard and nurturing enough to be a supreme teacher. That's what I learned from you. That perseverance, even in the face of ignorance, and courage to pass your knowledge on, even if the knowledge you shared was not what your society embraced. That you died violently is a crucial element of your life story. But I don't celebrate your martyrdom. I celebrate your life. I feel you in my bones, in the geography of my life, in the way my thoughts are formed, inside the woman I have become and will continue to be. Best, Ursula. Wow, did any of you had chills while you were listening to this letter? Oh my god. And wow, what a story, right, Hypatia? She did what she wanted to and what she thought was right, and she followed her instincts when all of the world told her that she was wrong. And that just reminds us that we need to be our own people and we need to be courageous enough to follow what is inside us. And for this, I thank Ursula so much for reminding us this lesson, for giving us this lesson in a time when we really need it. I mean, every day, it is so easy to give up now. But reading this letter, I'm just more encouraged to keep on the good fight. Thank you, Ursula. As always, you have mentored a spirit of utmost courageousness within me. Thank you so much.